social-9th class. Good afternoon everyone. So I'm Sukit, your online social tutor, and I'm back with our lesson. We are in our second lesson, the natural rhythms of the earth, and we have been already discussed about the natural rhythms. We have four common rhythm features about our earth, that are lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere. So among us them, we have started learning about the first sphere. It is its shape. I mean, how does lithosphere is shaped up? So we have seen about the landforms. Whenever the lithosphere is changing its shape, or else whenever it is shaping up, then we have started looking at. We have started observing. It forms some different kinds of landforms. And also we have three different orders of landforms based upon the based upon the landforms which have done by the internal process and external process. So the three landforms are: by the internal process, we have a first order landforms and second order landforms. You know very well, oceans and continents comes under the first order landforms, and the second order landforms are mountains, plains, and plateaus. And also, how does the land is completely getting shaped by the plate tectonics theory? The massive rock bases which the continents float, which the continent rides. So that are called as plate tectonics theory. Okay, that it is called as plate tectonics theory. Later we have seen about seafloor spreading, and these all are called as slow movements. These all were shaped by the slow movements of the earth. The lithosphere is changing, the lithosphere is shaping. And how about the sudden movements? Earthquakes and the volcanic eruptions. Two are the examples for sudden movements. Okay, this is all is internal process. What is this? This is all internal process. Here is getting changing and shaped up, and there is one other process which is external process. What is meant by external process? So externally, done by the externally, not by itself. Okay, not by itself. So this changing of land was done by itself. Okay, but here the lithosphere is changing itself. No, right? So how external process? The better example is third order landforms. External process. The better example is third order landforms. Third order landforms are the landforms which were getting shaped up by the work of wind and water. How? I mean, how does wind, how does water can change the land surface? Simply, if you observe, we are receiving a very heavy rainfall. If you could see, our roads, which are normal kacha roads, are getting cut away by the water force. There, the soil is getting cut by the water force. Then the road shape is going to be changed. Then the land surface, the road surface is going to be changed by the work of what? Water force, and even by the wind also. How it is going to be happen? Okay, so let us learn that thing in this live session. So how it's going to be happen? How the external process, or else the wind and water work to change the land surface. Okay, viewers. So almost Nigama, Nishad, Nikita, and some more Vemulawada branch students are also here. Hi Chandu, hi Nikita. Okay, so is this fine? And today, like, we are going to learn about external process. So let us know how does that external process, how can the water and wind is working to change the earth's surface, to change the land surface, not to change the land surface, to change the land surface. So there were four processes are here. Okay, weathering, erosion, transportation, and deposition. Okay, what we have been discussing about the rains. Like if there was a heavy rain, if there was a heavy rain, then how about our kacha roads looks like completely the top surface of the road is going to be change its shape. Okay, it's going to be change its shape because of the force of water. Because of the force of water, the soil is going to be cut. The soil is going to be cut away, and the shape is going to be changed. The road shape is going to be changed, right? And likewise, here weathering means by the water or else wind. By the water or else wind. Even the air means wind. Even the air. We have some of the chemicals. Okay. Even by the surface, then by the heavy force of wind, and water constantly heating up. Suppose here is a, if I leaves the single chalk on a earth on a air like itself, it's going to be completely shrunk and going to disappear, right? I'll tell you one more example. Like in our puja room, you can see that karpuram. Okay, if you keep that in an open area, it's going to be dissolved completely within an half an hour. Okay, similar way, the rocks also, by the force of wind, by the force of water, continuously, the continuous heating of water, continuous heating of wind, then the rocks are shaping, either they are becoming softened and going to become cracked down into the two parts, going to become a cracked down into the two parts. If you could observe any kinds of huge rocks, very heavy rocks, then you can see it's going to be, if you could see any cracked rocks, any cracked heavy rocks, then you can see the outer part of rock color is completely changed. If you compare with that cracked one, which is cracked internal color is completely changed. So why? What is the reason? Might be by the rain means water, by the wind means air. So by the work of wind and water, the rocks or else the top surface of the soil is completely going to be changed. Okay, that means the process which rocks are completely weakened. Huge rocks, very heavy solid rocks are going to be weakened and broken by the work of what? By the work of wind and water. Then it comes under what? Third order landform. And it's going to be done by any internal process? Isn't it done by any internal process? No, right? It was done by the external process, by the air and water, by the wind and water. Then what next? So then the next step is erosion. The next step is erosion. Erosion is nothing but when the process of wind and water continues rupture. The continuous water and wind is weakening and broken up the rocks and topsoil of surface. Then how it's going to be done? By the work of wind and water. That two are acts like the moving agents. The two are acts like the moving agents. Then they wear away the whole, cut down the rocks and topsoil surface to the other places, and that process is called as transportation. So weathering is weakening and brokening the rocks and topsoil of surface, and erosion means wearing away the earth's surface by these moving agents, which are wind and water, and so which were completely cuts down by the wind and water, that is going to be transported to the another places. So how this is going to be done? If you could see any kind of a rivers, okay, river areas, the huge flow, a very heavy flow is just flowing down from many kilometers, downwards from the many kilometers. In due course of that river, the places wherever it has a huge water course, then the soil surface or else the rocks which are in between the river path is going to be weathered by the water force, okay, and that are going to be wear away means coming apart from the rock and topsoil of surface, wearing away from them. Later they are going to be transported by the force that small chips of the rocks, not sometimes even they are very big, small chips, trees, pebbles, sediments, rocks, so all are going to be transported by the force of that water and even sometimes by the wind. We can see cyclones. Okay, one of the finest example is cyclones and floods. So when floods occur, we can see some other materials like sediment, silt, which is deposited here, which is going to be comes to our places by the force of water. So even this transportation can be takes almost hundreds of kilometers, miles of kilometers sometimes. Okay, so transportation can take place for miles of kilometers, thousands of kilometers sometimes. And when the water force or air force, when it is in a huge force, then it is deposited, then it is transported from one place to another place. It is fine. Okay, but there is one more thing. If the water force is going to be settled down, suppose some huge floods are coming from a very long way, if you could see the beginning part of floods, then there is a heavy force of water. Then you can observe the heavy force of water in the beginning of floods. And if you could see completely after kilometers, after 2 to 3 kilometers or 5 kilometers of a distance, then you can see the water flow is going to be settled down slowly. Okay, means the force is going to be calmed down, the force is going to be low, not that much of high intensity which is in the beginning. Okay, so when the water flow is going to be settled down, then there we can see the pebbles, the sediments, trees, rocks which were weathered before in the starting point, eroded in the starting point in the path of that force, water force, and transported by that force are going to be deposited. Deposited means that all those silt, sand, pebbles, sediments, trees, rocks are going to be dumped out here by what? By the slow force, by the low force of the water. Okay, that it is called as what? Deposition. Deposition. So they are completely deposited here, where the water force is very low. Is this clear? Weathering, erosion, transportation, deposition. If yes, kindly please type yes there. Okay, so weathering means process of rocks which were weakened and broken. Okay, and that broken one is going to be wear away. Means wear away means this side. Okay, wear away means this side. Like it's going to be completely out from that rocks and topsoil of the surface. Then next, that it is called as erosion. Okay, that is called as erosion. And that eroded material from the rocks, that eroded material from the rocks is going to be transported almost to the miles of kilometers by the force of water and wind. Then the transported material, the force of wind and water, when it comes down or it calms down, then it's going to be deposited at a place. Okay, so this is about the process how the wind and water is going to be change the land surface, change the land surface. So let us see some of the examples. Then you can observe, then you can understand the process of the external process how the land surface is going to be changed. Okay, so let us see. If you have textbooks, just open the page number 21. By seeing the pictures, you can understand it very clearly. Hello Rupa, how are you Nana? Okay, so is my book is visible? So first we have work of wind and water, right? So how it's going to be done? By the work of water, by the work of glaciers, waves and wind. Okay, these are all called natural external process. Natural external process. Even we have some of the artificial external process which is by humans. How is going to be done? Let's conclude in this life. Okay, so what is that? The work of water. How it's going to be done? The work of water. If you could see this, if you could see the picture, what are you observing here? A river which is flowing towards to the down, right? A river which is flowing towards to the down. And where the river begins from? So it's a very source from the mountains. Okay, and the flow of river very heavy or very fast, which means very swift when it is descends or else coming towards to the down. Then what is going to be happen is that means the starting all these mountains which are completely forwarded, which are completely in the path of river course, are even mountains, normal mountains. Then these were continuously cutting these mountains vertically. The water forces cutting the mountains vertically and shaped up this valley. As a result, a very deep valley is located here, a deep valley which is developed here, and it is completely narrow at the bottom, and very wide in the top. So these kind of valleys usually known as V-shaped valleys. So in this stage, especially the such water force can move even a very heavy hardened rocks also in its path, and it's going to be cut down and moving, flowing towards to the bottom. Okay, and canyon, even canyons also same. Okay, in the same way. But there was another feature which is known as gorges. Okay, gorges. Gorges are nothing but gorges are nothing but when the river cuts a very narrow valley like this, a very narrow valley like this, the sides are going to be very steep. The sides are going to be very steep, and this kind of a feature is known as what? Gorges. Gorges. This kind of a feature is known as gorges. Canyon just before we have seen. Okay, canyon just before we have seen. And do we have any gorges? We have. So we have a bison gorge in AP. Andhra Pradesh, we have a bison gorge and Indus gorge. We have another one, Indus gorge in Kashmir. Indus gorge in Kashmir, bison gorge in AP. Bison gorge is nothing but almost we have everyone like according to my knowledge, Siddipet and Silsila branches have been went to Papikondalu. So how many of my viewers have been seen Papikondalu? So that Papikondalu are called the gorges, bison gorge, which is in AP. That are gorge is a form of land form of gorge, and that has a name bison gorge. Okay, that has a name what? Bison gorge. And this is what? Bison gorge. Okay, and if we could see some of the waterfalls, if we see the waterfalls, then with the heavy force, with the huge force from the very top mountain, the water is going to be dumped down, right? So with the heavy force, like if you found any soil, just pour some a bottle of water on the same place, what you can observe? A small hole, right? A small hole. Okay, and same thing is here. When waterfalls are forcefully, those are flowing towards to the down and reaching to the top surface of a soil, then they forms another feature called plum pool, which means they are going to be dig a very deep pools. Okay, they are going to be dig very deep pools. So that water force even cuts the harder than the hardest rocks and the harder than the hardest soils. Okay, that are called as plum pools. Meanders. Meanders is nothing but, so if there is any delta region, the river is going to be flow with an adequate force, not so high, not so slow. Okay, so in the delta regions, especially like Ganga plain and Godavari plains. So during the floods, there was a deltas. There we have a deltas. So during the floods, the river flow is going to be change its path. It's going to be change its path. So that is even the course completely cuts and changing into the new path. So that path is called as what? That course plane is called as meanders. So it completely gently runs. The gentle run of river is called as a meander. The gentle run, not heavy, not slow. The gentle runs are called as meanders. And some parts, if you could see the internal picture, in some parts the these meanders are going to be have a very loop cutoffs from the course, from its course time. Then it's going to be form a small lake kind of a feature, and these kind of lakes are known as oxbow lakes. And one more feature we have By the work of water, it is delta regions. Delta region. Delta, which is originated actually from the word which is called delta itself. So how does it was done? Actually, when river reaches to the sea, when river before reaches to the sea, so the finest material is not it going to be dropped and deposited in the forming, and not it going to be deposited in the ocean. That is completely going to be deposited in the mouth of oceans. When again floods occurred, then that deposition is going to be become high. It's going to become high. So this is what it's a called floodplain, and in a similar way the delta is forming. Okay, so the silt and sediments are not yet going to be dropped in the ocean. So those are going to be dropped at the mouth of oceans. Then that it is called as what? Then it is called as delta. Okay, this is what the work of water. Okay, let us see the work of glaciers. Glaciers means what? So in Himalayas and mostly in Europe, Alp mountain regions, in Himalayas region, Alp mountain regions. So those two are completely ice covered regions, and they don't receive the rainfall, they receive the snowfall. So among us, that snow, when it is going to be formed in a single place and going to become hard ice state, harder ice state, then that it is called as a glacier. Might be by the weather force or else the heat which is produced naturally by the sun, that glaciers are going to be moved from one place to another place. Glaciers have a movement, but very slow, very gradual movement, like how almost months. So that movement of glaciers is called as what? That movement of huge mass and ice is called as glacier. Okay, and these glaciers, suppose I am showing a picture. These glaciers, suppose here it is a huge glacier. And when it is going to be melt and moving forward, then it's going to be erode with the force of gravity. It's going to be erode some of the rocks, and it's going to be transport to further. So that erosion process which is done by the glaciers is known as plucking. I'm writing here, plucking. It is known as what? Plucking. Okay. And so when it is with the gravitational force, it's going to be flowed down. So the both sides, the sides of the hills, the sides of the rocks are going to be cut down by plucking, and it is going to be formed when the force of glaciers is going to become slow. Then it is going to be deposited that plucked rocks and plucked sediments to the both sides, and that are known as till and moraines. When it is depositing, then that it is called as moraines. So when that moraines were deposited at the both sides, then you can observe a U-shaped valley is going to be formed here. So by the work of water, these kind of landforms are getting shaped, and by the work of glacier, so all of we know the huge water bodies are called as oceans. So in the oceans itself, You can see four kinds of land features, that are sea caves, sea arches, stacks and sea cliff. So how this is going to be done? The waves, they continue. The constant erosion and deposition of the sea waves gives the coastal landforms, and sea waves, when they continuously strike at the rocks, and the sea waves, when they continuously strike at the sea at the rocks, then they develop a cave, kind of a landform. When that striking is continuous, then the cave is going to become like this, an arch. So then that caves, when the caves are become bigger and bigger, then it is going to be with only one roof, then one roof caves, then it is called as a sea arch. And when it is even continuous strikes, when the continuous strikes are happening, so then that it is called as stark, which no other rock basements and no other caves. So then that it is called as a stark, a steep kind of a rock which is in the mid of ocean, in the middle above the water, that is called as sea stocks. And by the continuous erosional process, a landform is going to be shaped, a cape is going to be headed kind of a cutting out into the sea, and this is called as sea cliff, and this is called as what? Sea cliff. So this is what the work of waves: sea cave, sea arches, stocks, sea cliff. Okay, and by the work of wind. So by the work of wind, the continuous erosion process of wind gives us the four landforms, that are mushroom rocks. By the wind force, by the wind erosion process, if any rocks, the lower portion is going to be completely eroded and the only upper part left, then these kind of a narrow rocks at the bottom and wider top rocks are called as mushrooms. Why? Because these are completely looks like a mushrooms. Okay, and inselbergs are nothing but in a plain regions, these are completely isolated and raised abruptly, raised suddenly, then these kind of rocks are called as inselbergs. Okay, so let us see one more thing is sand dunes is nothing but these are mostly going to be formed in a desert regions, like these dunes, they form just a number of unstable hill shapes in a desert, unstable hill shapes with a very fine sand in the desert, and that are called as sand dunes. And one more thing is Lewis plains. So these sand to the neighboring places, that sand is going to be deposited in a neighboring place, and it is going to be yellow and very fertile. So that kind of plains are known as Lewis plains. So the sand dunes and Lewis plains. Mostly Lewis plains is going to be oftenly asked in our exams for 1 mark, and sand dunes for a 2 marks answer. Okay. Okay, this is what. And vegetation and human beings. Vegetation is nothing but, you know very well, plants, trees, grass. So what they do, they help in weathering process. Plants are helping in a weathering process. How means the weathered rocks, it's whether the plant roots are going to be percolate into the ground, then it is going to become, then the roots are going to weaken the rocks and to enter water into it, and the rocks are going to be break down. Okay, the rocks are going to be break down, then that it is called the other way of changing landscapes by the vegetation, and even by the human beings. What work the human beings are doing? By mining, we have learned in it, doing agriculture, building up dams, we have to cut huge kind of huge hills, and we have to evacuate many kind of tribals, and we have to cut down many trees. So in the due course, the landform is going to be changed. And by the industrial revolution also, industrial revolution is the main thing. By the human activities, to change landforms, okay. So this is what, how does lithosphere, or else the lithos, the sand, the stone or rock is shaped up and going to be shaping in what ways. So there are two things, internal process and external process. Internal process already we have studied, and external process we have studied. So glacier means, Nikita, glacier means nothing but the huge amount of ice and snow when it formed in a place in a very harder state, then that is called as glaciers. Okay. Do any others have any doubts? Josna, Neeraj Challa branch, Josna, Rupa, Nikita, Nigama, Nishit, and some of the other viewers also. So anybody have any doubts? Okay, fine. So this is about our second lesson. Our second lesson is also completed. We have successfully completed first lesson and second lesson. And we'll catch up in the next slide again with another